Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Tech Business Roundtable podcast show. This is a podcast show dedicated to shining a spotlight on tech innovators, entrepreneurs, founders, and the compelling narratives behind the movements that they've established. I'm your host, Ryan Davies, and I'm hosting today's discussion on bridging the technology gap for legacy industries with Matt Kleinman. Matt, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am super excited. This is a topic I'm a little bit of PTSD from going back into my world about this, but really excited to have you here to hear all about it.
Hey, Ryan, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Excellent. Matt, he's the co-founder and CEO of Cumulus Digital Systems, which is digitizing quality assurance in industrial maintenance and construction with an ultimate end goal of eliminating accidents, unplanned downtime, and reworking at industrial sites caused by poor work quality. So you've had some experience with Shell and in aerospace as well. Lots of advising in early stage energy, life science, technology companies, and leading in different activities, commercialization activities in energy, biomedical, space, defense. I could go on for a long time. I won't, because we won't spend the entire half hour here talking about all of your amazing credentials and background, but you're clearly the right person to talk to about this and talking about the gap that exists in bringing, these legacy companies and legacy industries from sometimes the last century still into this one. So let's talk. You've had about 15 years of experience doing this. Let's dive right into kind of what you've seen and what you've noticed, and what legacy industries do you tend to see kind of lumped into this group?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, and thanks for that effusive and probably undeserved introduction. Really appreciate it. But you're right. It has been about 15 years that I've been focused on this particular topic, and I'll just real quick, without getting too much into a story, just explain how I got into it. I was originally working in aerospace, as you mentioned. I live and work outside of Boston, Massachusetts, at a company called Draper, which goes all the way back to the Apollo program and building control systems for aircraft and spacecraft. And after the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2010, a number of energy companies came to us and said, we want to learn from you as experts in making aircraft and spacecraft safe, how we can apply some of these principles that we bring in from aerospace that have been developed over the decades to make aerospace as safe as it is today. How could we apply that to make sure something like the Deepwater Horizon disaster doesn't happen again? And I was one of the people among several leading this effort at Draper, leading these interactions with these energy companies. And that was the first time I was ever exposed to real heavy industry through oil and gas in that case. And it really opened my eyes into just how much, how important the industry is for the world, how much desire there is among the industry to improve and get better, with Deepwater Horizon being a big wake-up call, but then also how big of a gap there was to actually cover, both from a technology, an infrastructure, an engineering, a process perspective, and kind of dove right in, did that through Draper for a couple of years, and then ended up being hired by one of our customers, Shell, to start a center inside of Shell focused on bringing in these capabilities throughout the energy supply chain. And that's kind of eventually led to Cumulus, and we can go through that whole story, but I'll stop there. And that's how I got into it. And those are the types of industries that we end up focusing on.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the challenges. There are many, right? It's we're talking about the fact that a lot of these industries, they have giants in them, right? There's change management, which is a nightmare. We'll talk more about that and how you navigate those waters. But how have you found, the challenge between, you've got laggards in these industries, obviously, that are way far behind the people, like you said, that are knocking on your door asking for this. And how do you find that this has been going in terms of these legacy industries trying to raise the bar and keep up and be able to keep up, not just to regulations and things, but to want to be a leader in these industries, and how that's changed over your 15 years?
Yep. I think at the executive level, there has been for some time this desire to get better. I think there really is, wanting to, caring about the safety of workers, the safety of the environment, not having disasters. The problem is that these are dangerous activities in many cases. You're dealing with highly flammable materials, or big machinery that could be dangerous. And so there are inherent risks to that. And the industries were developed over many, many years to be conservative and slow moving, because when you build one of these large facilities, you don't want to make fast decisions about, well, let's just try something else, because trying something else without the right thought that goes into it could have really deadly consequences. So there's all of this bureaucratic and technological barriers to making change. And as the world is getting faster, as technology is changing faster, it's harder and harder for a lot of these industries to keep up. But things are changing, and I'll give one example. When I first joined Shell, it was impossible to go out into an operating facility with a tablet or a smartphone. You just, couldn't do it. There was too much fear. Oh, it's going to cause a spark, and something bad's going to happen. And probably because something bad did happen in the very early days of having some of these handheld devices, and that just became accepted that you cannot bring something in the field. Well, it's very hard to implement any sort of modern technology if you can't bring a connected device into the field. And that was a huge, huge problem. And it really delayed things. Well, around maybe 2017, 2018 or so, people started to realize, hey, one, these devices are not going to spark and they're not going to explode. I mean, the risk of that is so minute that almost to be negligible. But two, the value proposition that you can get from having connected devices in the field, whether it's from tracking work in real time, connecting to other IoT devices, just guiding a worker through a process, eliminating paper. There was so much value that executives said, we have to change this. And it changed when that switch happened, it changed pretty quickly to now mobile devices, smart devices are ubiquitous, and it's not an issue at all. You still have to be careful, and especially if you're in the live hydrocarbon environment, but there are accepted ways to do it. And then COVID, a silver lining of COVID was that transformation just went from the early adopters to everybody else, because everybody else had to,
Right.
And it just became accepted. So the industry is changing, but it is slow to change, some for good reasons, some for bad reasons. And folks in the industry like myself just are keep, chugging away at it, and we're getting there.
So Matt, for our listeners, I mean, we may have somebody who's struggling in one of these legacy industries, maybe working with somebody who's one of those laggards to adopting technology or getting their voice through. And I think one of the biggest problems, and I've seen it from digital transformation sides time and again, is where do I start? Like I'm so far behind that I don't know how to start on step one, or I've got so many pain points. I don't know how to start on step one without impacting everything else I do, because there's certain interconnections, but it's so messy.
Yeah.
What's the advice you have? And I mean, again, you've got direct experience with this, walking in going, here's the ground floor. What does that look like to you?
Yeah, a couple of things. Great question. And that is absolutely something we encounter every day. The first thing is one of the most important things that we brought over from aerospace into heavy industry was the concept of systems engineering and systems thinking. And it sounds a little scary, but really anybody can do it. You don't have to be, to build an airplane with systems engineering, you need to be a trained systems engineer, but anybody could adopt some of these principles. And what basically systems thinking means is you are looking at your facility, your project, your team, whatever level of abstraction you want to look at it, as an interconnected system and not a bunch of disconnected silos, which is typically how people think of things in industry. Is this is my work group, or this is my area of the facility, that's what I care about, that's what I'm responsible for, and it's independent from everything else. So the first thing is to adopt this systems mindset, and it's hard to describe just on a podcast, the step-by-step how to do it. But there's resources out there, and actually my company is about to publish a book called Work Done Right that talks about this, is go through this process of thinking about all of the different factors that affect whatever the challenges are that you're facing, whether it's safety, productivity, efficiency, What are the different factors, and look at it as an interconnected system. So it's people, it's suppliers, it's equipment, it's material, it's regulations, it's your contracting process. Think about it and try to be very open-minded towards that. You can't just kind of go barreling in with whatever the shiniest object is that you want to improve. So understand your system, understand your problems. Once you go through that process, then it's making sure you're walking before you're running. I see so many companies that say, we want to implement this great augmented reality system, or we want to have some other really high-tech, exciting system, some AI. Now is the buzzword of the year that we want to bring into it, which is all valuable in the right context. But if you say, well, do you have connectivity? Do you have a Wi-Fi connectivity in your plant? No, there's no connectivity. Well, do you have 5G reception? No, reception's pretty poor. Well, maybe that's a problem you need to solve first before you start giving people AR headsets to go use in the field. Because if they get out, it might work great indoors in the lab, inside of a workshop. But once you get outside into the field, you're going to have a big problem, and you're going to wonder why all this money you spent on these great headsets has gone to waste. So really thinking about it from a bottoms up perspective is important.
Road mapping is so critical, and it's so glossed over, or it's a buzzword, right?
Yep.
I guess maybe that was last year's or 2 years ago was road mapping. Now it's AI, right? Where that's the important of it, and having the right the right data information, the right data sets to draw from. I know Cumulus, you've done 7 million different work. I mean, that's staggering number. You've got an amazing expertise from this. So tell me how you take all of that information, that big data lake that you've got, all the work completions you've done, and can push that into reality to help people see this transformation that is possible from that stage.
Yeah, that's something that's actually really exciting about AI. And as much as it's a buzzword, it is a very real transformation that's happening. So what our team has been able to do is take those 7 million work completions, which means it's 7 million examples of real workers in the field accomplishing a task using our system. And we've been able to integrate them with a large language model. And so we could now recommend procedures to people and say, what is the best way to do X? We can look at all this data and say, well, here's a bunch of examples of how similar things have been done. And now our system is able to, in seconds, just recommend, here's a procedure you should use for completing the task you've asked about. And then we can put in different variables, and here's the best way to do this. Or if you want to eliminate a certain amount of time or whatever it is, you could use that data to make these recommendations. And that's just one example of what AI gives us. But you hit on the right point. It's important to have that data in the first place. And your AI system, your AI assistant or co-pilot is only as good as the data you have. And the data that most industrial facilities have is quite poor. And that's actually why we started Cumulus, was to build these data sets about work in the field. There were so many, I remember in the mid 2010s, so many startups and large companies coming with their early versions of analytics products that look quaint now, but were cutting edge 10 years ago, and said, give us all your data and we're going to be able to generate all these insights. Well, for us, the data was non-existent. It was in people's heads. It was maybe in binders in a trailer somewhere. And so we knew that, again, going back to road mapping, which is a point you raised, we have to start collecting data from the field in a structured way. And we've been doing that for the last 5 or 6 years. And now the AI and analytics capabilities that are available on the market are getting to the point that we can actually use that data to do really cool things. But if I was talking to the manager of facility, an IT manager, a digitalization manager, it's where is your data, what shape is it in, and how is it accessible, and is it complete? Is the data complete, and is it accurate? Those are things you have to look at. It's not fun work. It's grueling. It could be tedious, but you really need to do that in order to take advantage of some of these new technologies that are coming onto the market.
Absolutely. I mean, we were talking before we started here, with my wife's company, and she does machine safeguarding and all this stuff. And they create a tool. It was the same thing. I had so many times she'd leave the house in the morning in this horrible mood, going, "Where are you going today?" I got to go to an on-site audit because they filled in one box and they took the wrong time for a stop time, and now this is totally useless information. And so, it's
Yeah,
exactly it, right? So when you've got a resource like Cumulus has, where we have the data lake to draw from, that we can draw
exactly.
parallels to, this is the resource there. And I mean, I guess that ties into, I shouldn't say, I guess, I'd love to learn more to make sure I'm right, but work done right that you're doing, that's my understanding, is that's kind of what you were doing, right? Is understanding how you got the data, the digital tools, and
Yeah.
the workflow, and how it all kind of comes together, and the importance of that, correct?
Yeah, exactly. The work done right book was, we've been asked many times by companies we work with, our customers, just asked about our experience. How did we get here? How do we identify the problem to solve and solve it in a way that was unique and valuable? And it was really goes back to that whole systems thinking approach, which started back, in the early 2010s. And so we decided to write it up, and we wrote a book, and that's written as a guidebook to somebody who was in the position we used to be in when we were inside a shell, and to say, this is how you start your journey. It is written for somebody who is a digitalization manager, who's not a trained systems engineer, but how could I use this to know where to start, just where to begin the process? How do I identify what are the highest value problems to solve, the highest potential technologies to solve them, and to understand, am I ready for this technology? What are the roadblocks I have to clear before I actually get started? And it's just written as a guidebook to bring someone through the process that we followed and have been successful with.
Perfect. I mean, that's Matt, that's exactly, I think, what people are desperate for. Like you said, people are asking you to do it. You delivered, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And you touched on something a little bit before. We were talking about, what it's like with some of the legacy industries and the companies, and getting in and understanding, is the idea of working in silos, right? And my friend of 30 plus years at this point, we go way back. He works for a very large corporation where we are, and it's the same thing. He does, well, the SAP system, this doesn't talk to that. Now they want to use this, and they want to be on an Excel spreadsheet still, or whatever. It's wild. So take us through that journey a little bit about the, companies. Obviously, there's an importance to working in silos, but then how does that information translate? How do people kind of overcome that gap, even when it's not necessarily even a legacy gap, but just a communication gap, and how that works?
Ultimately, the folks in this industry are a see it to believe it type of culture, and you have to create opportunities for them to see the benefits of what they're doing, so that they never want to go back to doing it the old way. And then once they have that experience, and it's very hard to sell someone on that, you have to give them that experience. And I'll give a couple of examples from just our own work. And then once you kind of cross that chasm, you can start breaking down those barriers, and people start to have the word of mouth that says, yes, we have to do this. If we do this, look at all this either money we save, or how much safer it is to do this work. And so just a couple of examples to give that your audience might be interested in. One, we have a customer that does railroad tank cars, and they fill the tank cars and then they put them together. And they were being regularly fined by the federal government in the United States for leaks of these tank cars. And leaks, these are chemicals that can be dangerous, so the government takes it very seriously.
Mhm.
And they were having 3 or 4 fines per month because of improperly tightened bolts, or things like that either could or did result in leaks. And it started to become just a way of doing business, and they just started incorporating it into their costs. But then they were able to implement our system, and in the first 6 months of using our system, they didn't have a single fine related to leaks,
Wow.
because suddenly they were able to, what happened was, they were able to, one, make sure the workers were doing their work correctly, and for instance, tightening the bolts properly so they wouldn't come loose. Then they had a record of it. So if there was a problem down the road, and these tank cars are touched by many different companies, so many different silos, that's why I use this example, they were able to show the government, well, when it left our facility, here's the records, the data of it, actually the work, it was fine when it left. So even if there was a leak down the road, it wasn't them. And having that kind of traceability and accountability made a huge difference in a very short amount of time. Another customer was a data center customer. We were very involved in building data centers, which is a huge industry right now. And they had one construction project, they were getting behind schedule, and it was very easy for the manager to say, well, there's a new technology we're using, Cumulus, that must be the cause of why we're getting behind schedule, and let's stop using Cumulus. We're going to tell our bosses that we're not going to use it anymore. And they did. And that lasted for about a week. And it lasted for about a week because the workers went back to the management and said, they're making us go back to paper. Do you realize how inefficient this is to go back to paper versus having this digital system? It's costing us hours and hours and hours, and this is not going to solve your schedule problem. Look somewhere else. And that would never have happened. They were the most skeptical bunch when we first started working with them. Yeah. And then after maybe a couple of months, you took it away, and the workers said, we're not going back to the old ways. And now they will be evangelists, not just for our system, which selfishly is great, but for technology in general. So you have to create these experiences where people have that wow moment. And that's how you start. That's the only way that we've seen to start really breaking it down. You can have all the aspirational talks and videos and everything else, but until people see it, believe it, feel it, and see their own peers, wow, they're acting this way, or they're responding this way rather, then it gets exciting.
I think you're just absolutely. Well, first of all, did you just sit back and say you'll be back, and just with a smile on your face, knowing they were probably going to be back in a week or two? And
so I didn't expect it that fast, but things like that have happened before, right? You think of the what's the movie, the song "You'll Be Back"? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the movie. Oh, Hamilton. It's yes. Where King George is. You'll be back. Sorry, I have young daughter. We listen to Hamilton endlessly. So
me too, as you can tell.
Yeah. So we went through a phase. But anyway, lost my train of thought. But yeah, I kind of expected it. So my team who was managing that customer was obviously very concerned when they first told them we're going to stop using your system, and it was disappointing. And you never want to see that, but that wasn't the first time it's happened. It was in record time that they made the decision to come back. That's what was surprising about it, was because I said, look, they'll come back. This will not be the end of it. We've seen this happen before, because it's easy to blame whatever the new system is for whatever problem you're having, and that's a risk for technology companies. And that's something I've warned people, I warned peers about, and even talked to potential customers about. There are some companies where you can go in there and they are just a mess, and you can tell they have lax management practices. They have terrible safety cultures. Yeah. And there's sometimes you have to select your customers, because if you bring a system in like that and say, look, your problems aren't technology, you have some more fundamental issues to work out, because what's going to happen is they're going to bring in the new system. Something will inevitably go wrong, because what's the expression that culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Right. Yeah.
I think that's either Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger. And if the culture is terrible, and apply that to technology, culture will eat technology for breakfast. You can have the best system, but it's still operated by people. And we've had a couple of close calls where we've gone into we're working with a potential customer. Either we didn't get the work, or we kind of backed away from it, and something happened maybe 6 months, a year later. There was an accident at the site, and we just knew that they were trying to put a Band-Aid on something that was much deeper, a much deeper disease in the company. and they had to work out first. And that's another part of the systems thinking methodology is sometimes technology, and this is from, I'm a technology evangelist, as I'm sure, or as you are too. Sometimes technology is not the answer to your problems, and you have
Right.
to understand that. Whether it's a cultural issue, maybe it's a contracting process issue, how you manage your people. You need to be honest with yourself about that. And if you bring new technology into a bad situation, it's not gonna solve any problems, and it could just compound it because you think you're solving the problem, but you're not actually solving it.
I was going to say, I again, I go back to my days in digital transformation and automation work and things like that. And
Yeah,
people come to you with I've prescribed what I need and I've got my solution. You can provide it, and you look at it going, "Oh, this isn't going to end well because if you don't do
yeah,
the steps before this, nothing's coming of it, right?" And I think that I know
yeah.
we're deep into it here, but I really want to address. I think all of this goes around the art of change management, and I think that's
Yep.
probably what I mean, for me, an
Fundamentally,
art,
yeah.
and I think you're incredible at it. I can tell already from what you do is the ability to recognize not just the changes that people think they need, but being able to coach them through that, as you mentioned, right? Speak to the right audience. What's in the C-level suite is not the same as the person working on the floor for what they need to see to go, wow, I need this, right? And it's that disconnect. So I know that's a huge. We could talk about this for hours, but I mean, from a
Exactly.
change management perspective, you think that's the fundamental piece that needs to happen to get the buy-in, right?
Fundamentally, it is all about change management. Change is incredibly hard for people and organizations at all sizes, whether you're a small technology company to a Fortune 100 industrial conglomerate. Change is hard, uh, and my point of view has always been, people focus on change too narrowly. They don't look at it, not to overuse the word, but they don't look at it systematically, and they also look for quick and easy fixes very often. That it's often not the sexy or exciting stuff that is going to change your problem. Managing organizations, managing people is hard, and you have to do the hard work to do it right.
I think we're gonna have to do a whole nother one on just change management on its
Yeah,
own because I know people are going to want to hear all about that. So you're not going
yeah,
to be off the hook with me. I'm going to have you back here
that
to go
sounds
into
great.
that one next
Look
because
forward to
I'm
it.
super excited. But before we sign off here, I want to take a minute to kind of turn it over to you. Again, Work Done Right is the book that's coming out here right away.
Yeah.
Cumulus Digital Systems CEO. Uh, let us know how people can find you, where they can learn more about you and connect with you to kind of get some of that expertise and guidance that probably a lot of our listeners might desperately need or want to shine light to somebody who does need it for sure.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate the opportunity to plug a few things. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me. Um, I'm pretty active on it. Matthew Kleinman, Cumulus Digital Systems. There aren't, should be pretty easy to find. Also, just Matt at cumulusds.com is my email address, Matt at cumulusds.com. The book, to plug it, yeah, is Work Done Right. It is available for pre-order now on Amazon, and is going to be fully published on October 31st. So Halloween, but it's not so scary. And, but reach out, love to talk to people, very passionate about helping people in industries solve these challenges.
The book might not be scary, but I bet you the situations that people are in are, and that's the point of why you need to get the book to be able to start unraveling those scary situations, right? So
Exactly. I'm going to use that. That's great, Ryan. Thanks.
feel free, it's all yours. So Matt, I want to take a minute to thank you, Matt Kleinman, for this amazing podcast, Bridging the Technology Gap for Legacy Industries. And I want to thank our listeners. We can't do what we do without you. So until we meet again with another amazing TBR episode, and Matt, you're coming back for another one.
Look
I'm your
forward
host,
to it.
Ryan Davies. Thank you so much for joining, for listening today. Feel free to like, comment, and share this with anybody that you feel would benefit from Matt's expertise. Matt, thanks again. Can't wait for our next one.
Thanks, Ryan. Look
Thanks. Take care, everybody. Until next time.